First question, so
We're recording.
because I don't know that I know my name.
Well, that's the first question.
That's the first question.
First of all, I'm Bob Herzog with the Silver Lake History Collective, and on camera, right over there is Dorsey Dujon, and we're here to interview Nadia Kaplan at her home at 1827 Fanning Street, and the date is August 14th, 2010. And the first question is, Nadia, tell us where you were born.
On the south side of Chicago, where our president comes from.
And will you tell us the year?
Oh, 1921.
And you are almost 90 years old.
Right. Uh-huh.
Where did your parents come from?
They came from the Ukraine. At that time, it was under the domination of Russia and Poland. And my mother came almost 100 years ago.
Almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
You've told me before that your mother had various jobs, but what did your father do?
He was a tool and die maker.
Tool and die maker.
And he wound up working for Singer Sewing Machine. That was his last job.
Very good. And what was school like in Chicago when you were living there?
Well, that was our whole life. School was our whole life. My parents, of course, didn't have a car, and we made our own recreation by going places on the streetcar. But our life revolved around the school, around the church, and around Settlement House.
What church did your family belong to?
Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox.
Or Ukrainian Orthodox, whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So your life pretty much changed when you met your husband-to-be, Norman. Can you tell us about that and about what age you were?
Well, I was 21, and I met him at a wedding, and he snatched onto me quickly. We went for a walk, and I realized there's more to him than I thought. And he proposed.
Right away?
Yeah.
Wow. And did you put him off or?
Well, for 7 weeks.
You held out for 7 weeks. Very good. And did you lived with him in Chicago?
No, in Waukegan.
Waukegan.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when did you move to Los Angeles?
In 1945. He was overseas. He was on the USS Dixie in the South Pacific, and we had agreed ahead of time that I would come to California before he got home. So I found a place in Sunland, Tahunga, a little house that was being remodeled, and I prepared for his coming, and he came in 45 of January.
Tell us about the tablecloth that you made for him.
Well, I wanted to convince him that I was more than just a teacher, that I could also be a housewife and domesticated. So my oldest sister, was very skillful with her hands. She could crochet, she could knit, she could tap, she could embroider, she could quilt, everything under the sun. So I persuaded her to teach me a very simple stitch so I could make something. She said, well, start with a doily. And I said, no, I want to make a tablecloth. Well, it took me 6-7 months to make the tablecloth. And I had the tablecloth on an old barbecue table, and I served the first dinner. It was meatloaf and lumpy mashed potatoes, and what was the other thing? Mashed potatoes and carrots. The second night, it was leftover meatloaf, canned corn, and a salad. And the third night, it was hot dogs. And he looked at the hot dogs and he thought to himself, I think I'm going to return to the Navy. Eat third grub, it's better than this. And then he decided to keep his mouth shut and decided he would do the cooking and let me do what I do best, which was teach. So when I had come to California, for 7 weeks I crocheted this stupid, ugly tablecloth. And I thought to myself, if I would have spent the time teaching, I would have made at least $1,000 to put away on the house. So when I said something about that, he said, look, the tablecloth is worth $1,000. So that's the tablecloth.
And it got lost.
I don't know where it is.
Disappeared someplace.
Yeah, I looked for it.
And he didn't even remember the
No, he couldn't remember the tablecloth.
Yeah.
He just remembered
The food.
the meals.
So, where did you first live when you
Well,
moved
first in Burbank, his
Excuse me.
folks, until I found the house. And it was hard finding a place during World War II time. And I was lucky to have found this little, it was little more than a shack. But it was being remodeled, and we lived there for several years. And then we found a lovely, lovely new modern house, moved there, and then I was nudging him that we should buy a home. Now he was the counselor, executive director of the Veterans Information Center. He was giving everybody advice of buying a house, and we were in a rental. So we had to move because the rent went up $5 to $95 a month. So I went looking for another place, and I found just a small, tiny, little apartment, 3 rooms, so that we would be uncomfortable. Well, we wound up being there for 4 years.
And then you found this.
Yeah, well, yes, and it was an old house at that time. It was pretty beaten up. At first, the price was $32,500, and we shook our head and said, we can't swing it. That's too much. But Norman, coming home from work, would periodically pass the house here, and one day he came home and he says the for sale sign is up again. So we went back and negotiated, and they brought it down to $27,000. Originally, it cost only $4,000 to build a house.
When was it built?
In '39, between '36 and '39, and only $4,000 to build it.
It's amazing,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I don't know how much the property was, and it was done by Kessling. So after we moved here and did lots of remodeling and repairing and everything, it's now a Kessling Kaplan house.
The KK house.
A KK, just
So to
KK,
speak.
not a third one.
Anyway, it's a 3-story house,
Mhm.
and there's a swimming pool down below us on that side of the house, and wonderful views across the valley to the other side of Silver Lake, plus views of the lake. And we'll maybe get a look at that a little bit later. So you've lived, excuse me, you've lived in this house for 53 years?
Since 1956. So,
Yeah, I can't do.
We're recording.
Tell us about your daughters.
well, I have 2 daughters, and I figured out something. I have 1 son-in-law, 2 daughters, 3 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren.
Wonderful.
And the daughters are Fawn and Penny. Fawn is the older of the 2. Penny was a redhead. She won't dye her hair, so she's gone gray. And they're wonderful, wonderful daughters and wonderful grandchildren, and the 4 great-grandchildren are really something.
Where did your daughters go to school here in Silver Lake?
Well, right here at Marshall, and Penny went to Clifford Street School, and then they both attended, what's the place off of Hyperion there, the middle school. Can't remember the name of it.
Rowena?
And then Marshall.
The
Ivanhoe?
Ivanhoe.
No, not Ivanhoe.
Not Ivanhoe.
No. It's a middle school. Thomas Starr?
Thomas Starr.
Oh, all right.
You know, it's in the notes here.
King.
Should be
It's
able to-
King, right?
I don't know. It's in the notes here. Could you turn that off just a sec? Put it on standby.
Isn't it?
We on?
We're
King.
on.
King Middle School.
Yeah.
Okay. I had asked you before about interesting things that happened in the neighborhood, and you made mention of an airplane landing in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
When did that
Yeah,
happen?
oh God, years ago. And right around the bend, so you really couldn't see it unless you drove there.
It was a crash landing? It wasn't?
It must have been a crash landing, and apparently the person was able to swim to the shore or something.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned about the lake being drained?
Yeah, twice.
Once recently.
Yeah, once recently and once, maybe like 30 years ago. And it was a hole. A
Must
swamp.
be funny I can
Yeah.
remember the recent one when looking out at the lake and there's just a big hole with
Yeah.
puddles. It's strange, we're not used to that.
Mhm.
What did you do when you, as a family, when you wanted to dine out? Where did you go?
Well, we loved Japanese food. We liked Mexican food, American food. Norman loved food, and he was always exploring, finding different kinds of ethnic foods to eat. So we were brought up on all kinds of food.
And you used to go to the Astro, too, with
Yeah.
the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's still a terrific place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the neighborhood like when you first lived here?
Well, less trees for one thing. I had a good view of the lake. Right now it's pretty obscure because the neighbor next door hasn't trimmed his trees back, so I have to look hard to see the lake and the mountains. But it was nice and friendly. We were so involved in our work that we really didn't get that acquainted with people on both sides, yes, but beyond the two houses on each side, we were restricted in our movements. We were home so little of the time.
Well, that leads to my next question, which is the formation of the Foundation for the Junior Blind. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yes. Norman had gotten a job doing fundraising for a camp for blind children in Central California. And he really he didn't want to be a fundraiser, but he got acquainted with some 17 blind children, teenagers, and they said, hey, we don't have anything for young people here. Braille Institute emphasizes adult recreation, and we have nothing. We have nothing to do on weekends. We have nothing to do on summers. 2 weeks of summer camp up in Central California isn't enough. And so he started the foundation, a group of women from Beverly Hills called Freelancers, gave him his first grant of $5,000. And he found an old store building on Santa Monica Boulevard, and people came in and spruced it up, painted it, and we started a program almost immediately. And these 17 kids were the guides of what we should do. They told us what they wanted. And so we had everything. We had drama, we had storytelling, we had music, we had wrestling, we had square dancing, and regular dancing, crafts, everything possible under the sun. And the program started almost immediately because Norman wasn't the kind that waited for a committee to decide whether something was needed or not. When he got an idea, or these 17 came through with an idea, he implemented it immediately without fooling around. And so the program grew rapidly. On Fridays after school, the kids would be picked up by volunteer drivers, and Norman would have dinner for them. And sometimes we'd go to foreign restaurants as their guests, and so they got to eat different kinds of foods. And after dinner, they would have square dancing at first, and then they got tired of square dancing, wanted the regular ballroom dancing. So that's what we had. We had a disc jockey run records, and we brought in sighted kids to dance with the blind children. And it was a good Friday night program. And then Saturdays is when we had classes then in this old Santa Monica Boulevard. And I worked with young kids, 6 to 8 years. And my assignment was outside in a little enclosed area. Rain or shine, that's where we were.
About what year was this?
That was in 56,
56.
53.
53.
Mm-hmm. And eventually we outgrew that building and found one on Edgemont and Wilshire Boulevard. A lovely building, but it still didn't give us that much room. And a church down the street said that I could bring my children there on Saturdays. So with the young people that were helping me with a record player and records and books and balls and everything, with the children we would walk the 2 blocks to the church, and we had a great big area, great big gym to work in. Eventually they gave me space where I could store my stuff. And then I noticed that things were disappearing. So I put a sign up saying, "Thou shalt not steal." And that took care of it. That took care of it. Well, Norman never ran. He didn't pick up a salary for the first 2 years at all. The first year's budget was $5,000. That went for the rent and the heating and heating of the building. And all his volunteers were volunteers without any salary, and he didn't accept it salary until the 3rd year. But he was appearing in lots of Lions clubs at their meetings and developing a little money bag situation. But at one point we were in desperate need. We were really broke and thought we'd have to close. Paul Coates, do you remember Paul Coates?
Name's familiar.
He did investigating of organizations or things or businesses that were not on the level. And so he sent his crew out assuming that we were an undesirable organization. Well, the crew went back and said, "Hey, they're doing a great job and they need the money." So instead of putting down the foundation, he ran a show on the foundation. And the camera crew showed the kids wrestling and dancing and doing crafts and all this stuff. And the next day there was a line of people outside the door on Santa Monica. It was still on Santa Monica Boulevard to give money to the foundation. So we survived that. And then, of course, we went to Wilshire Boulevard and outgrew that. And the old California Academy was up for sale. And Norman had raised enough money and put it aside, so we were able to buy it. Had buildings. It was 6 acres approximately, with a great big play area and swimming pool and everything. And I think that he had enough to pay for the whole thing. And after that, we started.
Nadia, where was the California Academy again?
On Angeles Vista Boulevard in the 5300 block. That's in the Crenshaw area, sort of. And so they start sprucing that place up and modernizing it and improving it. And right now it's a great big, all the buildings are new and have been replaced. And they have a moderately good program, not as good as what we had. But that's
when did you and your husband stop running the organization?
He retired in about 88, semi-retired because of his heart. So, but he planned a reunion where over 1,000 people came for the reunion between the kids and counselors, and they came from Australia and from England for this reunion. So we had the reunion there at Angela's Vista, and also at camp. We spent a little time at camp too.
But you, so you had a nonprofit organization and a board, and somebody took over that Norman approved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was an easy transition
Yeah.
for his retirement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's still going.
And it's still going.
It's a wonderful organization. Would you tell us about that wonderful trip that you took back to meet with John F. Kennedy?
All right. Well, I was running camp. We had gotten Camp Bloomfield. It was given to us by Hank Bloomfield. He was dying of cancer, and he rushed Norman that a place had to be found. And they found this camp of 40 acres, and it was a fishing lodge. So there was an old building and a living room and a kitchen and screened-in porch. And we were able to move into almost 2 weeks after we secured the camp. We opened up camp. We didn't have cots. We didn't have tents for the kids. They were brought in from Camp Pendleton. Well, previously for 2 years we had been renting camps for the summer up in Blue Jay, and I went in with my little group, and there was a wonderful person by the name of Herb Brandt. He was wonderful with the kids, absolutely wonderful, and they loved him dearly. But he would send 30 kids to the swimming pool for lessons, and these kids needed individual attention. You know, one teacher teaching swimming to 30 kids is impossible. Same way with craft. So I talked to Norman and I said, the groups have to be smaller. So Norman said, well, go in for the first 2 weeks and set up and organize a good program. So that's what my intentions were, to have little groups of not more than 4 in a class, and in some cases 8. Well, what happened was Herb had gone to Camp Pendleton to pick up the tents and the cots, and the truck tipped over and he wound up in the hospital. And I wound up running camp. Now, I'm not really camp material. I'm a big city girl from Chicago, and I had a heck of a lot to learn. But that first day of camp, with the parents having brought their children there, and the tents aren't up and the cots aren't up, the counselors hadn't arrived, and I'm playing for time for everything to show up, and they're saying, where should we put the suitcase? Finally, it was all put together by 10 o'clock that night. The tents got up and the kids got a place to sleep. But Herb wasn't in the hospital. He wasn't hurt that badly. But Norman felt that I was doing such a good job. He said, just stay for the summer. Well, it lasted 6 years. And I was good on organization. I could get good planning. And camp is dependent so much on counselors. And these counselors were absolutely fabulous. Absolutely. In reading their resume, if they showed a spark of interest in something or ability, I snatched upon it. So we had even fencing, and every time I called Norman, I'd say, I have a fencing teacher. He'd wind up getting all the material for it within 24 hours. Well, anyway, after 6 years, I wanted out because I love traveling, and
I'm still trying to picture sightless kids fencing. But they did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, archery by sound, baseball by sound, swimming, it wasn't a problem. Fishing, we had a trout pond there. They loved music, and hiking and campfires were absolutely wonderful, wonderful. So anyway, for a long time I've been nagging at Norman that I wanted to take the kids on the cross-country trip. And finally, and it was a way of getting out of being a camp director. So he let me work on it. He said he could get the Lions Club to sponsor it. And so for months and months I pored over National Geographics and the AAA travel guides and information from friends, and I set up the itinerary for the whole summer of 9.5 weeks. And they chose the 24 children that I would take. They chose the 6 counselors, 3 young women, girls, college age, 3 young men, college age, a driver. I took my 2 daughters, and we were off. And we were gone for 9.5 weeks. We did everything under the sun that you could possibly think of.
And the Lions clubs all along the way sponsored you and
Right.
set you up with
Yes,
food
they-
and
So they
place to
provided
stay.
the sleeping accommodations, they provided the food, and they provided the sightseeing if we needed a guide or anything. So, and we got such a wonderful reception from them, absolutely wonderful reception all along the way. I can't tell you enough how grateful I am to them, because not knowing the economic situation in each little town, for 36 people to barge in and make room for us and feed us and everything, it could have been a hardship on a lot of these Lions clubs, but they came through. I think of all the Lions clubs that Norman contacted, only 2 turned us down, which is pretty good. So we went to Grand Canyon, we went to I'm trying to think of in blank.
I'm gonna.
we did they danced on the showboat on the Mississippi River. We went to Hannibal, Missouri, Mark Twain's place, so they got to see the cave that Huckleberry Finn was in. We spent time on a farm in Blair. We went to the top of the Empire State Building. We went to Niagara Falls. We spent time on the horse farms in Kentucky and Tennessee.
what a wonderful trip for these children.
Yes.
Now, there's an interesting aspect of this story that you've written about, and that's the fact that you had some African American children with you, sightless African American children, and you had to go through the South.
Yes.
There are a couple of interesting stories that you
Yes.
can share with us.
All right, this was 1962, and Norman said that you might have problems, and I said, no, they'll leave us alone. What are they going to do with blind kids that are going to leave us alone? Well, that wasn't the case. Our first encounter was in Evansville, Indiana, and that was one place where the Lions Club didn't sponsor us, so I had to find motel for us, and I found a place, and I talked to the manager. I said I had 36 people. He says no problem, he could take care of us. There was a swimming pool, and that was a hot summer, and he popped in, looking in the bus that we were in, and he saw 3 black faces and pulled me aside. He says, they can't use the pool. And I got very upset about it, and then I remembered Norman had a similar situation when he was up in Blue Jay. The owner that we were leasing the camp from said that the black children couldn't use the swimming pool. And so I said, oh, don't worry, I have something to throw in the pool and that'll take care of it. And he accepted it. And the kids went swimming, all of them went swimming. But the big thing was in Bluefield, West Virginia.
Wait, tell us what you did what you did after the kids got out of the pool. You had something in your purse that you threw into the pool.
No, I told them I had something
Was
that
Alka-Seltzer?
would take care of it. I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay. I remembered you. I thought you threw 2 Alka-Seltzers into the pool.
Yeah. Well, it could have been. I just said I had something, and he accepted it and walked away. It said, oh, it's okay. In Bluefield was a crisis there. We came, always the Lions Club would meet us just outside of town and escort us into town. And always the kids were curious of where we were going to stay. Sometimes the Lions Club put us up in a motel or a hotel. We've slept on the floors of Y's and churches and armory at one time. At one time in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, we were in a wing of a hospital. And so the kids had a wonderful time with the hospital beds. But best of all was when we would be invited to the homes and the Lions Club would take a few children. And so they were always curious. So when I said, where are we going to stay? And they said, well, the white kids are going to stay in one hotel and the blacks in the other. And I opened my eyes and I said, but we've always been together. And they shrugged their shoulders and they said, well, we can't do anything about it. So that's what happened. We came into town and we were dumped off at this hotel for white kids only, white people only. And I went to the manager and I said, these kids aren't going to harm anything. Why would you object to 3 black children coming in? They've been with us all along. And he was a redneck. There was no way he was going to budge. And so they were put in a motel for blacks only. And it was a very critical situation because some of these kids weren't even aware, the kids themselves were aware that 3 of their companions were black. And that evening...
Colorblind.
Yeah, the blind are also colorblind. That happens to be our poster.
Oh, is it? I
Yeah,
didn't realize
the
that.
blind are colorblind. And so at the dinner that night, we all gathered together. The NCAAP was there, alarmed at what was going on. People were lined up on the streets watching to see if something was going to happen. And this was right during the Civil Rights Movement, and things were happening everywhere else. This was before even Martin Luther King had said, whatever he said, I forgot. But anyway,
I have a dream.
we had to walk down into a lower area of a building, of the Lions Club building where we had dinner. And it was kind of noisy. Everybody was nervous. And speeches were made, and I had to make my speech. And I said, well, in Los Angeles, we also have an integration problem. Our problem is integrating our blind with the sighted kids. And everything went quiet, and I realized I had said something wrong. And I saw a jukebox in the corner, and I said, oh, our kids love to dance. Anybody have a dime to put in the jukebox? So they pushed the tables back, and they had the jukebox going, and the kids were dancing, and my counselors were dancing with the 3 black children, and suddenly one of the Lions members went up and invited Loretta to dance. And everybody went, wow. And suddenly it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And one person came up to me and said, Mrs. Kaplan, we learned something today. and it wasn't necessarily about blindness. Well, about 2 years after this trip, I was looking in Look magazine, and Look at that time was giving awards to 10 cities in the country that made some advancement. And I'm looking and it says Bluefield, West Virginia. Wow, you know, it was just a little blurb, but they had built a swimming pool for all children, blacks and whites and everybody.
So what you said was not out of line, it was perfect.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It
So it hit
leveled the
home.
playing field.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now the highlight of this wonderful trip that you made
Was with President Kennedy. We did meet with Truman, and that was on Independence Day in Independence.
Missouri.
I planned it that way, and Truman loved young people, and he wanted to make sure that they knew their history. And so we did have classes with these 24 children before we went. I had a friend who taught history in high school, and he came and we reviewed history and geography also. And so I told the kids, be prepared because he's going to ask you questions and you have to know the answer. And I remember Rochelle saying, I hope he asks me who discovered America. I know that answer. Well, it was a hot, hot, hot day. He made a speech in front of his building. And then he met the kids, and we lined up and went, shook hands with him, and he said, how do you do, how do you do, how do you do, how do you do, how do you do? And that was it. And the kids were so disappointed. So when we were ready to meet with Kennedy, I said, now this guy's on the job. Don't expect more than a how do you do, or maybe even a wave from his office window. But we gathered for the occasion, and the Lions clubs and Jimmy Roosevelt helped set it up. And we arrived early in the morning and were taken on a tour of the place, and then we went to the Rose Garden. And then he came, this good-looking, wonderful man, down the steps, no signs of the backache that he was suffering. And he went right down the line, talking to everybody. We had our name tags, and he would greet everybody. Hope you're having a good time, Danny. Do you like Washington, D.C.? You know, something different to every single person along the way. And when he finished the line, he was ready to go back, and he had second thoughts. He turned around and said, are there any questions? Oh, no. First, he made a general welcoming speech, and ready to go back to his office, and he turned around, are there any questions? Well, this was really something. So some of the kids came through with questions. So the difference between the two presidents was very apparent. And I looked at my watch, it was 22 minutes that we had with him. And we still talk about it. We still talk about those 22 minutes with him.
You have some photos of that. Are they handy? Not right this moment.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get those on camera.
I'd like you to move over here, please, a little
How?
bit, because Nadia her neck is going to be
Can you put that on standby?
Yes, I will.
All right,
Where were we?
We're recording, and
Oh.
we're talking about photographs of JFK. And
Yes, quite a few photographs were taken. As a matter of fact, I have one, and I couldn't find it. I've showed it to the writing class, but I don't know where it is. But it's a picture of me facing Kennedy, and it shows Kennedy's back. And I'm laughing because it reminds me of the Monica Lewinsky picture.
Didn't you have, you read a story about a hat or your hair?
Oh, yes, yes. Let's see. Well, I was having a hard time taking care of my hair, as everybody was. And Norman flew over when we were going to meet with Kennedy, and he flew over. And then he surprised me by bringing me a wig and wigs just came into style at that time. And he brought a wig from his assistant Barbara, and it was a blonde wig. So it was a great thing because I started wearing, at the second half of the trip, I was wearing the wig. And when we were in New York, a Lions member was sitting next to me as we were going to Coney Island, and we were passing a shopping area, and he pointed out and he says, "Oh, they sell wigs now. Can you imagine women wearing wigs?" And I, "Oh God, yeah, how bad." Well, we went to Coney Island, and the kids are going on all these rides, and I didn't want to go. But they kept teasing me, and I finally went, and I had to hold my wig down the whole time. And the kids were roaring. The counselors were informing them what I looked like holding the wig down and going on the steeple or something. I've forgotten what it was called. But I don't think the Lions knew that I had a wig on. So.
It would be a problem taking care of your hair, wouldn't it? Particularly back in those days, because they didn't have real simple haircuts. Anyway, let's pause for just a sec.
And we're in the rose garden waiting for his arrival, and everything is quiet. You could hear a pin drop, and then everybody started nudging when he came down the stairs. And he started at one end.
I'm getting your reflection, Dorsey, off the table. Okay. Actually, I'm getting, we're recording.
All right, and he went right down the row of all the people. Lions clubs were with us. I'm wearing a white hat that a Lions member's wife gave to me for the occasion.
Just replace that one. We'll alternate up and down.
And he came to me and he said, "You're doing a great job, Mrs. Kaplan," or something like that. He did mention something. He said my name.
Next.
And
Okay.
these are more of the kids that he's talking to, and each one had a different message for each of them. Glad you're here. Are you enjoying the trip?
Okay.
The weather has been great for you, and have you been comfortable, and how is it on the bus? Now,
Okay. And this is a large group of people.
wait a minute.
That's at the Senate.
That's the Senate.
Oh, that's shooting down from the stairs of the Capitol building, I think.
Okay.
This is a good picture, and this is on the grounds of the White House as we're going to the White House itself. And Jimmy Roosevelt met us at the gate, and I walked with him, and I wanted to say how much I appreciated his father, but especially his mother, for what she was doing. And the kids crowded in to talk to him, so I didn't get an answer.
Okay.
The bus was old, beaten up. We had lots of problems all along the way, but our bus driver, Joe, kept having to repair it. It was not air conditioned, and it was a year of heat across the whole country. No storms. I think we had only one storm along the way.
Okay.
And this is aboard the
USS Forrestal.
Forrestal, yes. we were guests of the Navy there. We stayed on the base. They took us on an aircraft carrier, and the kids walked the full length to see how the runway for the planes that would take off. And also they got to go on the elevator that brought the airplanes
up. Wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Well, that's Senator Keiko.
This is another time.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Nice hat, Nadia.
Yeah. This is not the trip. This is
Who is this?
That's
Mayor Yorty.
Yes.
yeah, Mayor Yorty. Before we took off, why he gave us something to distribute to the different mayors along the way, and we met mayors and we met governors, and we were brought in even in Washington D.C. on a police escort. Can you imagine? Into Washington D.C. on a police escort
Incredible.
with sirens going and policemen stopping traffic.
Didn't one of your kids think that you were under arrest or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
I remember that. Okay, next.
That's Senator Keiko with two of the kids from the trip. And that's Keiko and my husband.
Yeah, let's get a picture of Norm. We don't have a really good one of him. Senator Keiko on the left and Norm Kaplan on the right. What is this reflection I'm getting? Okay.
And here's with Keiko, and can't think of the other ones. And then we had lunch in the Senate building as their guests, and had that special soup. I think it's a pea soup that they talk about. Also, the Lions Club arranged for the kids to get their eyes examined to see if any of them could be operated on. And so this is the kids coming off from the Eye Institute.
Yeah, I'll just go over here. No, there's too much glare.
Yeah, it's because it's inside. It's, I don't think,
No, it's, well, also Nadia's shadow is cast on it.
Oh, well, I can move out of the way.
is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
This Lions Club from Silver Springs, Maryland, were so fantastic. They just fell in love with our kids. Just fell in love.
It was a very special trip
Yeah.
because I remember newsreels.
They spent 5
about
days
this.
with us. They were all dressed in their beige coats and red jackets or red ties or something. And they all took off from their business and work and spent the 5 days with us. They were so thrilled. And years later, the Lions had their international convention here in Los Angeles. So they got in touch with me to ask if I could find a float builder for them. So I found a float builder, and they paraded on Hollywood Boulevard and used our kids. We recreated the scene of the president meeting the kids. And they won the prize, and so they turned the prize money over to us. But they were a wonderful one. They were all good. All the Lions were great. And in September's issue of Lions, there's a nice story that's for the kids that were on the trip are interviewed, and I am interviewed. So if you get a hold of
This coming September.
this coming September.
Well, then we'll have to add it to the story.
Okay, I am going to stop the camera because we're just about out of tape.
Okay. Nadia, today a nonprofit is in a totally different place than you were when you
Yes.
started.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to nonprofits about what you think how they should support themselves now?
Well, every area has such a big area to develop, and right now the foundation has been renamed to Junior Blind of America, but they're emphasizing, and which is not bad, but they have eliminated the Friday night dances, which we thought were important, and they eliminated the Saturday classes, which were important to us. But they're emphasizing the multi-handicapped and the babies and the little children, and they do special trips. Not anything like what we used to do, but we went iguana hunting and brought 13 iguanas back across the border. We smuggled them. We broke the law quite a bit, quite a bit. But we'd gone tidal pool study down in Puerto Penasco, Mexico. We've done river rafting with 100 kids down on the Colorado River. We knew Judy Resnick, the astronaut, and she arranged for Norman to bring well over 100 kids to Houston, Texas, to